haunted school. I grew up in a tiny rural town with a population of about 200 people, located 25 miles from the nearest larger town. Despite its small size, we somehow had an elementary school that, at the time, covered grades K-8. Throughout my years there, I always had this eerie feeling of being watched. But it wasn't until I moved on to high school in the next town that I truly realized how unsettling that school had been, because the feeling completely vanished. Everything strange that happened in that building seemed to revolve around two particular areas: the girls' bathroom and the gymnasium. Rather than try to make sense of it all, I'll just list the incidents by the grade I was in when they occurred. First and second grade, handprints would frequently appear on the mirror in the girls' restroom. At first, it seemed like the kind of thing a mischievous kid might do, but these prints were much higher than any of us could reach. No one ever confessed to making them. The weirdest part: some mornings, the handprints were already there before any students arrived, even though the janitor always cleaned the bathroom the night before. Third grade, one day, I entered the girls' restroom and chose the middle stall. The other two were completely open and empty, but as soon as I sat down, I noticed a pair of shoes in the stall next to mine. A sudden chill ran down my spine. I left in a hurry. Looking back, I clearly remember that I had checked before entering. The stall was empty. Fourth grade, I was washing my hands in the bathroom when I glanced up at the mirror and saw a tall blonde girl standing on the bench behind me. I spun around instantly, but no one was there. When I looked back at the mirror, she was gone. Sixth grade, after basketball practice, I was up in the balcony of the gym with some friends when something unexplainable happened. In one of the gym's corners, a large sheet of paper had been posted with recess rules written on it. We were all standing there when the paper ripped itself off the wall and fluttered to the ground. There was no breeze, no window open. It was as if someone had deliberately pulled it down. The air around us turned ice cold, and we didn't stick around to investigate. We bolted. Seventh grade. By this point, I had my first cell phone and was hanging out with friends by the computer lab, which was separate from the main school building. It was a popular after-school spot. That day, we were messing around with the negative filter on my phone's camera, taking random pictures behind the school. One of the back doors had a window, and when we looked at the photos, we noticed something terrifying ahead peering through the window in one of the shots. In the pictures taken just before and after, the window was completely clear. The school was locked up at the time. No one was inside. Unfortunately, that phone was broken beyond repair before I could retrieve the images, but the memory still haunts me. 8th grade. By my last year at the school, I finally gathered the courage to ask my mum if she thought the place was haunted. Since she wasn't originally from our town, she suggested I ask my aunt, who had lived there her entire life. When I asked my aunt if she believed the school was haunted, she immediately responded, "Well, you know your cousin died there, right?" I froze. I had heard rumors before about a girl who collapsed and died during PE class years ago in the same gym corner where so many strange things had happened, but I had never known her name, never even considered that she might be someone connected to me. My aunt told me her name was Lisa. She was 11 years old when she passed away from an undiagnosed heart condition. My aunt had been 17 at the time and still remembered her clearly. Shaking, I described the girl I'd seen in the mirror years before. Tall, with straight shoulder-length blonde hair. My aunt's face darkened. That sounds just like Lisa. Everything suddenly made sense. The eerie presence, the strange happenings. Why everything always centered around the girls' restroom and the gym. And most of all, why I had never felt truly afraid. It was Lisa, watching, but never harming. When I left that school, the feeling of being watched disappeared completely. For the first time in years, I could walk freely without glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something that wasn't supposed to be there. Knowing the truth gave me some closure, but even now, whenever I step inside that old school building, I still feel a chill crawl down my spine. Story 2. The ROTC Ghost Encounter. Back in high school, I was part of the ROTC program, specifically on the rifle team. My girlfriend at the time was also on the team, and we would often stay late after school for practice shooting. This was in Alabama during the 90s, and we typically stayed at school until around 7 p.m. when her mum would come to pick us up. We usually waited in the band room because it had a clear view of the parking lot, allowing us to see when her mum arrived. It was winter cold, dark, and quiet. By this time, nearly everyone had left the school except for me, my girlfriend, and our sergeant major. Now, our sergeant major was a Vietnam veteran, a tunnel rotisserie, the toughest and most intense person I had ever met. He was an absolute legend and a great role model, the kind of guy who commanded respect just by walking into a room. That night, everything changed. My girlfriend and I were standing in the band room, just chatting and waiting, when suddenly, a massive set of bluebells started violently shaking. The sound was deafening, a deep, metallic rattling that sent chills through both of us. We both turned at the same time, watching in frozen terror. Before I could even speak, the entire instrument lifted off the ground, flipped over mid-air, and came hurtling straight at us. It barely missed me, slamming into the wall with a force that shook the entire room. I didn't hesitate. I ran. There was no moment of logic, no checking to see if she saw it too. I didn't look back, I just bolted. My feet pounded against the floor as I sprinted down the hallway, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached our sergeant major's office. Only when I was inside his office, safe within those walls, did I turn around. My girlfriend was right behind me, her face pale as a sheet. She had seen everything. Gasping for breath, we frantically told Sergeant Major what had just happened. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss us. He just nodded, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he left his office and went to check the band room himself. We waited. The silence was unbearable. When he came back, he simply asked, "Were you two messing with the bells?" We shook our heads furiously. "They're all over the floor," he said, his voice calm but firm. We explained again how they had started moving on their own, how they had flown across the room. He nodded again, as if he had heard something similar before, and simply told us to stay in his office until her mum arrived. We didn't argue. When it was finally time to leave, he walked us out himself, through the band room. That was the last I ever heard of it from him. No explanations, no follow-ups, just silence. Eventually, my girlfriend and I stopped seeing each other, and over time, we lost contact. But I'm sure, 100% sure, if she was standing in front of me today, she would tell the exact same story, because whatever happened that night, it was real. Story 3. The Ghost in the Playground. When I was in elementary school, something happened that has haunted me ever since. Even though this was years ago, the memory remains vivid, permanently etched into my mind. It happened during recess. Our teacher blew the whistle, signaling that it was time to line up and return to class. As usual, we all rushed to get in line, but as the teacher began doing a head count, she noticed something was off. One student was missing. It was Annie, my friend. She had been playing with us just moments ago, but now she was nowhere to be found. That's when one of the students pointed to the trees near the playground. "She's over there," someone said. We all turned to look, and sure enough, sitting underneath one of the trees, her back facing us, was a girl with long brown hair. Annie also had brown hair, so naturally, we all assumed it was her. The teacher called out to her, "Annie, come on, it's time to go." No response. We called her name again. Nothing. She didn't even flinch. The teacher, clearly annoyed, walked over to the tree to fetch her. That's when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there stood Annie. She had just come back from the fence, where she had left her jacket on the opposite side of the playground. My heart dropped. If Annie had been at the fence this whole time, who was the girl under the tree? The whole class froze, watching as our teacher reached the tree. But when she turned around, she was alone. The mystery girl was gone. The teacher stared at the spot where the girl had been just seconds before. Confused, she scanned the area, then finally made her way back to us, clearly disturbed. "She was just there," she muttered, shaking her head. She asked Annie where she had been, and Annie insisted she had been by the fence the whole time. There was no way she could have run back to the group without us seeing her. The playground was too open, and we had all been watching. The realization sent shivers down my spine. Even stranger, our elementary school was extremely old, and just a year before, something horrific had happened down the street. A man had ended his wife's life, leaving behind their 2 children, both of whom had attended our school. One of the children was a girl the same age as us. After the incident, we never saw her again. To this day, I don't know if that girl under the tree was her ghost or something else entirely. But what I do know is that when I think about that moment about the girl with the long brown hair sitting silently under the tree, I still get chills. Some stories have no explanation, but that doesn't mean they aren't real. These accounts show that the supernatural might be closer than we think, and that we're not always alone even when we believe we are. If you enjoy real and terrifying stories, don't forget to leave a like to support the channel, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. Share with someone who loves horror stories. Have you ever experienced something scary or unexplainable? Share your story in the comments. Who knows, it might be featured in the next video. Stay alert, stay safe. See you next time.